Another part of managing hard disk is the maintenance on those disks to ensure that they continue to operate efficiently. Fragmentation is the process of breaking data up when writing it to a hard drive. This is going to happen inevitably. It's based on the file system. It's based on the cluster size for the file system, but ultimately it's based on the sectors on the drive, which is physically where stuff is getting put. So things are broken up and the pieces are placed in contiguous sectors on the drive whenever possible. But as you start deleting things and moving things, then that causes white space. And you may have had, let's just say you've got 10 sectors that are free and the next file that you put there needs 12. Well, then that means I'm going to take these 10 and then I'm going to search for the next available spot. And so what you end up getting is fragmentation and subsequent files aren't stored contiguously. And this can cause performance issues. If you're accessing programs, accessing data files, it can cause performance issues. So the defragmentation is going to need to happen. Now, thankfully, starting in Windows 7 and continuing on here to Windows 10, you are having this happen automatically. Okay, now you can manually do it using the Optimized Drives tool. The files will be rearranged, they'll be put back in an optimal location, but it is performed automatically. You can go in and configure which volumes it's going to do this for, how often it's going to do it for. You can turn it off if you want. It is a great thing that this is turned on. Occasionally, if things are slowing down on the hard drive, maybe check just to see, has this actually occurred? Other than that, it's pretty much out of sight, out of mind, but incredibly important. Another option that we've always had in Windows that we still do and Microsoft wants you to know about is disk quotas. I throw that little Microsoft wants you to know about it because I'm not sure exactly how helpful this is on a client machine. I can't say in 15 years I've ever done this on a client computer. Only on servers and shared directories have we used disk quotas. As the name implies, this is the ability to limit space on an NTFS partition, to pick a particular user and to say that user can only utilize X amount of storage. So it's useful in a system where multiple people are using the computer. Again, I just don't know how often it's actually done. So it is based on ownership. So I would create a quota for the entire volume and it would allow you to create, save files up to your particular quota, regardless of what folder they were in. Okay? Most times, users, the folders that are being used are either the program files directory or their own profiles. And so you can enable it and track that. It also just gives you the ability to track disk consumption. Sometimes I suppose we could just enable quotas but not limit storage space. That way I can go in and I can see a report on who's taking up the most space. But we can restrict as well. It allows you to proactively monitor available space, plan for storage increases, those kinds of things. Technically, there's a command line utility called fsutil that you can use to create disk quotas. I use fsutil to create massive files to just see the effect on a disk quota. You can use group policy to enable disk quotas, but more than likely this is something that would just be done on the properties of the drive itself. So let's take a look at a couple of these maintenance aspects. We're going to go through the disk defragment, and optimize drives is the application. Okay, this is the these are the drives, and this is the last time it was run and whatnot. Let's flip out to the host here. Okay, so I see a solid state drive and a hard disk drive. They've also been never run. What we can do here is we would just say optimize. I'm actually not going to do it just because you don't generally want to be using your computer when you're defragging, and that is the C drive. But here is where we can go and configure the schedule as well. Okay, so it's running weekly. It'll notify you if you miss scheduled runs. It's running on all new drives. That is a default. That's why I said this is pretty much hands-off. This is pretty much out of sight, out of mind, unless you needed to modify it for some reason, unless you wanted to stagger it. So I want the C drive happening on one day, and I want the the other happening on another time. Those are the times where you might go in and change. Over here, if you've got let's see, go to the properties of a disk. On the properties of the disk, you have a quota tab. You can click on Show Quota Settings. You can also get to this from Disk Management. We would be saying we want to enable quota management. Now right there, all that's doing is just tracking, okay? It's going to allow me to go in and see the quotas, produce reports, but it's not actually going to limit any space. So if you want to deny disk space, then you would do that. Then we're going to limit disk space, and we've got different options. So maybe I'm going to give everybody 20 gigs, And so I specify that that's the limit. We're going to warn them at 19 gigabytes, log an event when they exceed their warning level. Okay. This is basically like a default. If you hit quota entries, we could go in and we could make entries for different users. Oops. All right, so we could add in individual entries, and the built-in administrator account has an entry in here that's not limited. So if you don't have a entry particularly for your user account, then you fall under this. Okay? And again, it's all based on file and folder ownership. So as soon as somebody has created, has saved files, in excess of 20 gigs, then they would be denied the ability to do that. Okay? On the Tools tab on the disk, you also have a link to the Optimize and Defrag, and you also have a link to Check Disk, which can be used to check a drive for errors if it's having problems. So those are a couple of utilities that you can use for maintaining hard disks. A couple of times we've mentioned virtual hard drives. Virtual hard drives are used with virtual machines in conjunction with Client Hyper-V, but they can also be used for other purposes in Windows 10. Essentially, it's just using a portion of space on a physical drive, but it's contained within a single file. We talked about this in the native boot, but I just wanted to talk about a few other things just in relation to storage. They are portable from one system to another. So yes, you can boot to them. Yes, they're typically used with virtual machines, but if you choose to use it for storage, one of the big advantages is that it is portable. It's also a single point of backup. It looks like a hard drive, but it's physically stored in a single file. So you can easily just copy that file to another location if you want to use it on another system, or if you want to make that data accessible to a virtual machine. And they might not provide necessary performance, but often that's when you get into higher end database applications and things like that. I've used this to be able to provide a certain set of data, a certain set of tools every time I create a virtual machine. Every time I create a virtual machine, I have a copy of this VHDX file. I can link to it as an additional hard drive, and then I always have access to those tools. That's just the way that I've done it, but I can definitely see it from the perspective of backup and recovery as well. There are two different formats. I don't think we've gone into this in any detail. You've got the VHD and VHDX formats. The VHD format is backward compatible with Windows 7 with a 2 terabyte limit. The VHDX format was introduced with Windows 8 and supported on 8 and later. So that would include 10, and that is a 64 terabyte limit. When you create a virtual hard drive, you're going to be asked if you want to create a fixed size drive or a dynamic drive. A dynamic drive has expanding space, and so it's better efficiency. Basically, the drive will start out a very small drive, and then it will grow as you put data into the VHD or VHDX file. If you say fixed disks and you say you want a 20 gigabyte drive, it's going to create a 20 gigabyte file right off the bat. There is better performance, but they're tweaking that. The performance is it's pretty close now, and so the vast majority of times we're going to want to create a dynamic virtual drive. So let's go back into disk management here. All right, let's actually go back into the console that we had opened up. There we go. Okay, so in disk management, you can go up on the action menu and you can say you want to create a VHD. And then I would say, okay, well, this is the location of the VHD. Just browse here. And we'll put it on the E volume, but I'm going to call this storage. So my VHD, it's stored there. I'm going to make this 3 terabytes. It's going to be a VHDX file, and it's going to be dynamically expanding, okay? So I hit OK. And immediately that VHD file is going to show up. Now it's right here. It's unknown, not initialized. So it looks regular, like a regular disk with the exception of the icon is blue. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and initialize it, make it a GPT disk. Then we can right click, say we want to create a simple volume. I can create a mount point. Let's just do a drive letter here. Call this storage in a quick format. And so far, this has probably looked pretty similar to what we were seeing before. Right now, if I go to this PC, I'm going to see storage. It's going to be a 3 terabyte drive. When I open it up, it looks just like any other, any other thing that we would be doing, any other drive. Let's go back here, though, and we'll see that actually we've got a VHD file. And right now, the VHD file is about 330 megs. As I start to copy stuff into this VHD file, then that file, or onto that partition, I should say, then that will grow. Now, I don't know that I have a whole lot to copy here. I have any downloads? Yeah, I don't really have anything to copy, but it'll grow over time as we start to fill it up. But as I said, the benefit is you can always get to it here. You can always take a copy of that. You can always back that particular file up. Now, you're going to have to take it offline in disk management to be able to do it. So what we would typically do is use PowerShell. You use PowerShell to temporarily take the disk offline and then to save that virtual hard drive file to a particular location and then to go back and put the disk back online. So it is a unique way of doing things. Whether you're trying to use it to get information to be accessible to a virtual machine or you're just using it for its portability and recoverability, you can consider using these virtual hard drives really as you would a physical drive.